is, as you all know, the president of Bhaktivedanta Manor. She's an incredible author, incredible writer, incredible speaker. A lot of the photographs of Srila Prabhupada that we see were taken by her. One thing that you guys may not know is that she was very instrumental behind the Hare Krishna movie that came out. She actually listened to every single spoken word of Srila Prabhupada, that was ever recorded, because they wanted the narrative of that movie to be in Prabhupada's own voice. That is an incredible accomplishment. Incredible, actually. Because it made it so much more powerful to hear it directly from Prabhupada, his own story. So, aside from the fact that she knows the philosophy so incredibly well, her and Yadubara Prabhu is also very exalted. Yeah, everyone knows Yadubara Prabhu. They're very focused on children. A lot of the life choices that they've made over the years were around Haripriya and Amrita, what was best for them. And I think that's really, really remarkable, because what Prabhupada entrusted to Mother Visakha and Yadubara Prabhu was an incredible amount of service. However, in spite of that, they were able to balance taking care of their own children and doing the very important, incredible service that they're meant to do here for Srila Prabhupada. And of course, we all know Mother Visakha is 100% sold out for Srila Prabhupada. She's given her life to Prabhupada. This is the only reason why she's really living day to day, honestly, when it's to give her life to Prabhupada. It was an incredible example as a devotee. Regarding this particular topic, I felt that it was extremely important that we converse about this very important topic, and that we engage in serious discussion and a very mature discussion, because it is critical for the future of our movement. How important this topic is and the way it's been addressed in the past, that the method that we've addressing it is not substantial enough, it's not adequate enough, it's not that broad and mature understanding that's required. And if we want ISKCON to flourish in the world for the next 10,000 years, this is a very important discussion that we need to have. And the takeaway for me is, from my perspective, this is coming from me, my personal perspective, that for this particular demographic in the movement, there's been physical abuse, emotional abuse, all kinds of abuse, marginalization, etc. But then I was just thinking this morning that when, in the laws of the United States, for example, right, we have made it very clear that we've spelled out the laws in this country to give equal rights to every demographic, regardless of gender and race and etc. Right? The main challenge that we have in society as general is making the rubber meet the road. Right? We have an especially difficult challenge because the law books for the next 10,000 years and Srila Prabhupada's books, right, if improperly applied, right, in our movement, it can lead to spiritual abuse, right? Because the laws that we are supposed to be living our lives by, if they even indirectly or incorrectly condone, right, this type of treatment, this particular demographic that we're talking about today, that makes it it's at one level beyond what we're dealing with, the inequalities that we're experiencing in society today, right? So even more so, it's important that we have this discussion. And what really impressed me about this conversation is that in spite of the fact that this demographic has received that type of environment and thriving, right, in spite of that, right, that Mother Visakha has been able to very scholarly, intellectually, present this topic without any feelings of resentments, right? Without any feelings of marginalization or whatever, just keeping an extremely objective perspective, reading what is exactly in Srila Prabhupada's books, and presenting it in that very, very objective, scholarly, intellectual way that a mature audience from both sides, men and women, can deeply appreciate. So I can go on and on. This topic is very important to me, but I will not delay the presentation any longer. I would like everyone to very, very warmly welcome Mother Visakha and show your enthusiasm and support of the incredible work that she's doing by loudly calling out Haribol.
Haribol!
Hare Krishna. Om Ganat Marandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvase Sasunyavadi Pasyata Deshatane. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo. Thank you all so much for coming. We're very grateful that you're here. We also want to thank Bhaktivedanta Institute and Leela Devi Dasi for facilitating this program and for her enthusiasm. And certainly I want to thank Sham Kishore and Rasamrita for their enthusiasm also. It was their enthusiasm that produced this. So yes, this is a topic that's been with us ever since the formation of ISKCON, the Hare Krishna movement, and it's been unresolved, I think, to some extent. Prabhupada left a very powerful legacy for his followers. And the topic, of course, of Vaishnavis and Krishna consciousness is very integral to that legacy that he left us. So it's important for ourselves as members of the Hare Krishna movement, for outsiders, for the future of the Hare Krishna movement, that we try to understand it comprehensively, and its nuances and so forth. So this is an attempt to do just that, a frail attempt. And there are many challenges, which is why it's been with us for all these decades, challenges to this attempt. One is that the male-female psychology, the tendency, the men tend to feel superior to women, and women tend to defer to men. What to do? Also, when we came to Prabhupada's movement, we brought with us different cultural, societal, familial, and personal expectations about what men and women can and cannot, or should and should not do. So those also entered the Hare Krishna movement in their varieties. Our understanding of Prabhupada's statements, example, and mood related to women also vary. We all read the same books, but we come to different conclusions. We may mistake some past and present values and customs of traditional India as Vaishnava values taught by Srila Prabhupada. That especially when so many Hindus joined the Krishna consciousness movement, they brought with them their own understanding of what is Krishna consciousness related to Hinduism. And sometimes that was conforming to Prabhupada's teachings, and sometimes it wasn't, but they became mixed, and that became a bit confusing. Also, the sexual attraction between men and women, we overlook it or minimize it at our peril, and that also complicates the issue immeasurably. So this is a summary of this presentation. What do our scriptures say about women and their roles? How did Srila Prabhupada translate those roles to our current situation? And that's divided into these 5 topics, touchy topics, classifications, Daiva Varnashram, what is protection, and also this butterfly principle, the sexual attraction between male and female, and a conclusion. So our prayer is that we can be true to Prabhupada's spirit, to his mood and to his teachings. And we begin with the scriptural statements. Sorry. So we want to stick to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, based on the authority of the Shastra. The Gurus have so many statements, and the Sadhus also. And sometimes these are complex and apparently contradictory. When irreligion is prominent in the family, O Krishna, the women of the family become polluted. And from the degradation of womanhood, O descendant of Vrishni, comes unwanted progeny. This is from the first chapter of the Gita. So here we're hearing about the importance of women's chastity. And Prabhupada said women have the power of inspiration for men. He gave the example of Cleopatra as an inspiration for Julius Caesar. And he writes, such powerful women are controlled by shyness. Therefore, shyness is important for women. Once this control valve is loosened, havoc and unwanted children result. Children who disrupt their parents' lives and who may later disrupt society as well.
To render service to the husband, to be always favorably disposed toward the husband, to be equally well disposed toward the husband's relatives and friends, and to follow the vows of the husband. These are the four principles to be followed by women described as chaste.
So here we're hearing from the Bhagavatam that the traditional system was a patriarchy, that the government, men held the power and their wives had a supportive role. And the result of this supportive role, women's chastity, and supporting her husband generally, is also described. Not only was Mother Sita powerful, but any woman who follows in the footsteps of Mother Sita can also become similarly powerful. There are many instances of this in the history of Vedic literature. Whenever we find a description of ideal chaste women, Mother Sita is among them. Mandodari, the wife of Ravana, was also very chaste. Similarly, Draupadi was one of 5 exalted chaste women. As a man must follow great personalities like Brahma and Narada, a woman must follow the path of such ideal women as Sita, Mandodari, and Draupadi. By staying chaste and faithful to her husband, a woman enriches herself with supernatural power. So this is the result of chastity, according to our scriptures, that women have great power. That Ravana was defeated because he was cursed by Sita. Similarly, Gandhari, Draupadi, Kunti, Devahuti, these are all exalted women. Prabhupada says that Gandhari, although a woman, was no less than Bhishma Dev in character. Bhishma Dev is one of the 12 Mahajans, so that's a very exalted position. Draupadi attained the same destination as her exalted husbands. Women are certainly eligible for the highest destination. And they can also be more qualified than men.
The wives of Kaliya were actually serious devotees of Lord Krishna, and according to the acharyas, they had often tried to convince their husband to surrender to him. Finally, finding himself in unbearable agony, Kaliya remembered his wife's advice and took shelter of the Lord.
So we have a commentary by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur to this pastime. And he said that the wives of Kaliya, the Nagapatnis, thought our husband has now become a Vaishnava. We must try to protect him. And therefore they prayed to the Supreme Lord that he spare Kaliya, which he did, based on the prayers of these exalted devotees. So we may note that all the other demons in Vrindavan, Putana, Bakasura, Agasura, Keshi, they were all killed by Krishna. The one that was spared was Kaliya, and that was due to the prayers of his wives, these exalted ladies.
Because the wives of the Brahmanas were great devotees of the Lord, the foolish Brahmanas received spiritual benefit and finally came to their senses. Taking note of their wives' pure transcendental devotion for Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and seeing their own lack of devotion, the Brahmanas felt most sorrowful and began to condemn themselves.
So here these Brahmanas noted that their wives were completely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And noting that, they accepted them as their spiritual masters. They recognized their own failings in consciousness. And from that day on, it's described that they no longer thought of their wives, but as Vaishnavis, as exalted devotees. So clearly, the Shastras are telling us that this consciousness is not based on the body. The position can be very exalted, whatever the body This is the message of the Shastras through these pastimes. And we have to see the bhakti, and based on the bhakti, the person is considered exalted, whatever body they happen to be in. So then we want to look at how Prabhupada translated these roles, because he was taking an entire culture from one part of the world to another. This is an extraordinary attempt and accomplishment, as we know. And it was an entirely different milieu. The people were so loose in the West compared to what he was used to. The relationship between men and women, the use of various types of intoxicants. It was a very radical shift, one would say. And so there was promiscuity, there was feminism, that people considered marriage passé, they were not interested in marriage. How to deal with all this? So from the very beginning, Prabhupada encouraged his followers to get themselves married. And we know the early marriages between Shamsundar and Malati and Mukunda and Janaki were there. Prabhupada encouraged this very much. He wanted the husbands to be responsible, the wives to be chaste. And although this was shockingly contradictory to what the young people were doing, they accepted this. It's quite amazing when you think about it. They left their drugs, they left their promiscuity, and they accepted this, what you would call a very strict traditional culture. Prabhupada made it attractive, and he made us understand that we have a goal to attain, that we can actually progress in that way by following these principles. So there's some touchy subjects that we don't want to shy away with in relation to scriptures and Srila Prabhupada's statements. It doesn't mean that women are oppressed or repressed or suppressed at all. It means women have to be a little bit clever, one could say. We have a beautiful example in Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel was Chancellor of Germany for 16 years. And it's described, because she was dealing almost entirely with men. So it's described, she spent her political career playing down the gender, shunning a feminist label, offering modesty, caution, and diligent preparation as an implicit contrast to male swagger. Haribol. Merkel's leadership was often invisible because she painstakingly built consensus behind the scenes and avoided claiming credit for ideas she often originated. In other words, she would be with her ministers, she would have some idea to improve the situation of the people of Germany. She would tell it to a minister and he would present it like it was his idea, and she would say, "That's a wonderful idea. I'm so glad you brought that idea up." So in this way, she could function very successfully in this milieu of male swagger, as it's described. So this is a way to understand that women may be resident and deferential to men, yet they can lead men also, as the Nagapatnis did, as the Brahmins' wives did.
The actual system is that the husband is spiritual master to his wife. But if the wife can bring her husband into practicing this process, then it is all right that the husband accepts wife as spiritual master. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said that anyone who knows the science of Krishna, that person should be accepted as spiritual master, regardless of any material so-called qualifications, such as rich or poor, man or woman, or Brahmana or Sudra.
So here Prabhupada is affirming the position of the Nagapatnis and the wives of the Brahmanas. And actually we're meant to be personal. We're meant to see beyond the body to the consciousness. And then if we find people have an exalted consciousness, again, regardless of the body, we worship those people, we facilitate them, we serve them as best we can. In other words, it's not based on stereotypes or gender biases. So here's another statement from Prabhupada's writing. Every person must get married. Every woman especially must get married. So this apparently is an absolute statement. And yet, if we look a little bit deeper, we find it's a generalization. It's not an absolute statement. So by definition, generalizations are inferred from specific cases, and they're not meant to be applied to everyone indiscriminately. Whereas universal statements, like we're not the body, that is applied to everyone in all cases. So we want to look at generalizations here. In the scripture, as well as in Srila Prabhupada's writings, we sometimes find sweeping generalizations. These generalizations are not absolute statements, but they are there ultimately to give us informed direction. The goal of all of them is to assist us in transcending all material designations. So here we have a quote from Prabhupada. This is a room conversation in Washington, D.C. Someone like to read that?
Prabhupada. If one can remain without marriage, that is the first class. Rupanuga. Women also? Prabhupada. Women also. What is the use of this material husband? Make Krishna husband. Krishna is prepared to become everything. Love him as husband, love him as son, love him as friend.
So here from the first statement, which was in Prabhupada's books, it sounds like every woman should get married. First he said everyone should get married, especially every woman should get married. It doesn't seem to leave a lot of room for anything else. But here we find it's a generalization, and he's saying that if a woman is able to remain single in good consciousness, then she should do that. That's a very exalted position to be in. So he wasn't small-minded and narrow, but rather he was very broad-minded, and he accepted the diversity of his disciples and accommodated that. Krishna consciousness is variegated and dynamic.
If one becomes Krishna conscious, then he, she doesn't require a husband. He, she does not require. He, she knows that Krishna is my protector. Why shall I artificially seek after father and what protection for a few days either the father or the son or the husband may give? Real protection is Krishna.
Thank you. Yeah, so again, what we find practically is that there are many women in our Hare Krishna movement who are single, who are doing tremendous service. Mukhya Prabhu is one example, but there's so many. Kaishori is another, Malati. So we don't want to minimize this or discourage this, but to see that they are able to remain single and do wonderful service in good consciousness, and that's to be encouraged, despite these generalizations that we find occasionally. At the same time, we don't want to encourage artificial renunciation that doesn't benefit anyone, male or female. If someone does it out of frustration, if someone does it out of a desire for prestige, like that benefits no one, not the individual, not the society. So these quotes perhaps are a bit easy to understand. We'll try some more challenging statements.
Generally, all women desire material enjoyment. They are called less intelligent because they are mostly prone to material enjoyment.
So again, this is a generalization. It is not a universal statement, meaning it's inferred from specific cases and is not to be applied indiscriminately. So here's some evidence of that.
Both of them are very intelligent, and Nandarani is more intelligent than her husband. I know that. Atreya Rishi. I find that he is very intelligent, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada. Dayananda. Atreya Rishi. Yes, Prabhupada. He is intelligent, but Nandarani is still more intelligent. I know that. Both of them are intelligent, but this girl appears to be more intelligent.
Thank you. So in Sanskrit we find two words that are both translated as intelligent. One is buddhi, which usually means to analyze or to judge, to discern. And another one is medha. Medha is more emotional intelligence, the ability to nourish. And so in the Gita we find in the 10th chapter, when Krishna is listing the qualities of women, medhas amongst them, fine speech, memory, and also this intelligence, this medha. So it's recognized that women have this emotional intelligence. In the purport, Prabhupada writes, the ability not only to read many books on different subject matters, but to understand them and apply them when necessary is intelligence, medha, another opulence, attributed to women specifically by Krishna himself.
The Lord is so kind that he does not show special favor only to one who is a great philosopher. He knows the sincerity of purpose. For this reason only, women generally assemble in great numbers in any sort of religious function. In every country and in every sect of religion, it appears that the women are more interested than the men.
So generally people have both this buddhi, analytical intelligence, and emotional intelligence. It's just a matter of degree. And the idea is to be personal, not to stereotype people. This is the goal of Krishna consciousness. Personalism and Krishna's service. And actually, if we look at the world today, we're in dire need of this kind of consciousness. It's this stereotype creates sexism, it creates racism, innumerable problems as a result. So one of our responsibilities is to ourselves become trained in seeing past the designations and to help others also see the soul rather than the body. So Prabhupada also said, quoting Chanaka Pandit, never place your faith in a woman or a politician. And he said this to Jamuna Devi Dasi on 4 occasions, she says. And on the last occasion, it was in Bombay, she said, in 1973. And he laughed after he said it. He was in front of a small group of men. And then he looked at her and he said, what do you think, Yamuna? And Yamuna said, of course it is true, Prabhupada. And at that time he became grave. And he looked at her with great feeling and said, but you are not a woman, you are a Vaishnavi. So Prabhupada is distinguishing between materialistic non-devotee women and devotee women. Sometime later I asked Jamuna why she agreed to that statement. And she said that in her estimation, half the population were politicians and the other half were women. She was very clever. So Prabhupada consistently wanted to help us transcend material designations and wanted all of us to advance spiritually.
Women, Sudras, and Vaishyas are ordinarily regarded as less intelligent, but if one takes to Krishna consciousness, one is the most intelligent. Although Kunti had the body of a woman, she was a devotee. Therefore she was not like any ordinary unintelligent woman. Rather, she was the most intelligent, for she recognized Krishna to be the Supreme Godhead.
So the idea is that there's no material qualification that satisfies Krishna. That he is satisfied and our endeavors become successful out of developing our devotional love for him. So from Krishna's viewpoint, until we're elevated in spiritual consciousness, we're conditioned and fallen. And from that viewpoint, those of us who are spiritually inclined are more intelligent than those who aren't on the spiritual platform. Krishna doesn't discriminate in that way. So now we want to look at classifications. There's a purpose to classifying people. One is to understand our conditional predicament, to start rising spiritually through purification, and to get an indication of where we are on Krishna's map, so to speak, and how we can move forward to achieve our desired destination. Prabhupada says these women are not ordinary women, they are preachers, they are Vaishnavas. By their association, one becomes a Vaishnava. So we want to try to facilitate all devotees, whatever their situation, so that they can remain enthusiastic and determined in their journey in Krishna consciousness and offer their full potential to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada himself did that, and we are also meant to do that.
Wow. Excuse me, Visakha, are these your photos that you're showing? All these photos?
This one isn't. This is in
Oxford.
Oxford, yeah.
The other ones?
I don't remember. Prabhupada says our mission that everyone becomes happy. We don't want to see that we exploit somebody else and I become happy. We want to see that everyone is happy. But they do not know how to become happy. So Krishna consciousness means facilitating all devotees so that they can go on without hesitation. Many of the men in our society who have a rather conservative idea of what women should and shouldn't do make their presentation based on this varnashram system. So we just wanted to look at this varnashram system a little bit. Do we have a reader?
Yes. Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur wanted to reestablish Daiva Varna Ashram. In Daiva Varna Ashram there cannot be acknowledgement of social status according to birthright, because in Bhagavad Gita it is said that the determined considerations are guna karma, one's qualities and work. It is this Daiva Varna Ashram that should be established all over the world to continue a perfect society for Krishna consciousness. This may be astonishing to foolish critics, but it is one of the functions of a Krishna consciousness society.
Thank you. So very simply in the Gita, Krishna says that one's position in society is not according to birth, but according to one's qualities and activities. So that also includes gender.
Mrs. Wax. Could a woman be a temple president? Prabhupada. Yes, why not? Mrs. Wax. Glad to hear it. Prabhupada. But because women are less intelligent, they should remain dependent on first-class father, first-class husband, and first-class son. Then she is first class. That is the injunction. Women should remain dependent in childhood upon first-class father, in youthhood upon first-class husband, and in old age upon first-class son. Woman is never independent. If she becomes independent, her life is not very good. She must agree to remain dependent on first-class father, first-class husband, and first-class son. 3 stages.
So some people will read this and think, well, a woman can't be temple president because she has to be dependent. But that's not what Prabhupada says. He says she's temple president and also she's dependent. She's protected. So he doesn't see it as a contradiction. We have to somehow accommodate that in our own understanding, not to think that he's contradicting himself, but both things are true.
He's
So
also using the word first class father, first class husband,
Yes.
first class son. He is qualifying it.
Yes. We can understand what is first class. Yeah, a person must have integrity, kindness, courage, spiritual commitment, maturity. All these things make one first class, so it's not something to be taken casually. But we wanted to look a little more closely at protection here.
Protection means what? Your protection idea is very limited. You want to be protected for a few years, but the protection of Krishna is perpetually, you are being protected. Tyaktva deham pranarjanma 90, Bhagavad Gita 4:9. You don't get any more material body. That is real protection.
So here, Prabhupada, as he so often does, he brings us to the highest principle, That if Krishna wants to protect someone, no one can harm that person. If Krishna wants to harm someone, no one can protect him. So ultimately, protection is in the hands of Krishna. He also says women must be protected, and it is the duties of the leaders of our society to see that this is carried out. So we don't want to minimize this principle of protection. We know we have this Me Too movement now. Sometimes men are so uncontrolled that they force themselves upon women. It can't be ignored. So in that sense, women do need protection. And one very effective way to do this is if women serve in the association of devotees and become absorbed in their service, then their consciousness remains focused and fixed, which is a beautiful type of protection for them. He also says women should always be protected. That is, protection does not mean negligence. Protection means to give him, her, all facilities. That is protection. So it means we have to look more broadly at this protection, that we want to encourage, as we say, keep women enthused. So we remove all the barriers, whether they're mental or physical, emotional obstacles to their spiritual growth, and facilitate that through their service, whatever shape that service may take. How did Prabhupada protect women? First of all, educating us about our true identities as spirit souls, engaging us in devotional service, a process by which we can attain liberation from death and rebirth, which is the ultimate protection. And when there were limited facilities, especially in India, then he would give the women their due share of those physical resources. In India especially, he would ensure that his female disciples had proper transportation, proper prasadam, proper sleeping facilities. So sometimes protection is confused for denying women opportunities. But actually it's not at all like that. It's actually repression. And an interesting statement was made by one of the devotees that Krishna would not create a social system in which half the population felt frustrated and unfulfilled. That if women have a propensity, it's meant to flourish in Krishna's service, not that they have to repress that. So it's not about denying service based on the body that causes distress, but it means providing a safe place where that service can be executed. So if women are denied that opportunity, it hurts our movement, and it hurts the woman involved, and it hurts our spread of Krishna consciousness. It's called a lose-lose-lose scenario.
In the glorious days, or before the event of age of Kali, the Brahmins, the cows, the women, the children, and the old men were properly given protection.
So we protect what's valuable. The Brahmins are protected because they can train the rest of society how to attain spiritual goals. The cows are protected because they provide milk, which is invaluable for human development. The women are protected because they can help create another generation that's focused and self-controlled, that can make progress in life. The children are protected so they can prepare themselves for adulthood and becoming liberated from material bondage. And of course the old people, the old men, are protected because they're on their way to change their bodies.
The child must be taken care of. That is good. Similarly, women also. Just like old man like us, I am always taken care of. That is civilization. That is human society.
So here Prabhupada is very humbly putting himself in the category of old men, one of the 5 categories that are protected. And we can see that because he was protected, it doesn't mean that in any way his service was reduced. Rather, it was the opposite. It was enhanced. Devotees would provide whatever he needed, the quiet, the machinery, so he could do his translating, prasadam, whatever it was, so that he could flourish in his service and give us a library of spiritual literature.
Prabhupada, if a woman is perfect in Krishna consciousness, just like Janava Devi, Lord Nityananda's wife, she was Acharya. She was Acharya. She was controlling the whole Vaishnava community. Aitreya Rishi. Lord Nityananda, Prabhupada. Wife, Janava Devi. She was controlling the whole Gaudiya Vaishnava community. Aitreya Rishi. Do you have any references about that in any of your books, Srila Prabhupada? Prabhupada, I don't think, but there are many acharyas. Maybe somewhere I might have mentioned. It is not that women cannot be acharya. Generally, they do not become. In very special case, but Janava Devi was accepted as, but she did not declare.
So again, we're trying to look at this Daiva Varnashram. And again, according to one's qualities and activities, one functions in society, not according to birth. What we find practically is that, for whatever reason, sometimes men are threatened by a powerful, potent woman. And they use the philosophy to try to contain that powerful, potent woman, which is very unfortunate. Actually, we should be proud of what Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis are doing in Prabhupada's service. So it may take courage to see Vaishnavis as full persons and support them in doing all they can for Krishna. But this is a vital and essential part of Prabhupada's teachings and example.
Professor O'Connell, it is possible, Swamiji, for a woman to be a guru in the line of disciplic succession? Prabhupada, yes, Janava Devi was, but Nityananda's wife, she became. If she is able to go to the highest perfection of life, why is it not possible to become guru? But not so many. Actually, one who has attained the perfection, she can become guru. But man or woman, unless one has attained the perfection, Ye Krishna Tattva Veti Se Guru Hoy, from C.C. Madhya 8:128. The qualification of guru is that he must be fully cognizant of the science of Krishna. Then he or she can become guru. Ye Krishna Tattva Veti Se Guru Hoy. In our material world, is it any prohibition that woman cannot become professor? If she is qualified, she can become professor. What is the wrong there? She must be qualified. That is the position. So, similarly, if the woman understands Krishna consciousness perfectly, she can become guru.
Yes, thank you. So, while Prabhupada was present, we found that there were women head pujaris, and of course pujaris, women head cooks, women and the head of the art department, Radharani Devi Dasi. So he didn't restrict in that way their propensity to lead and to lead other men also. There's an interesting quote from a book that Tamal Krishna Goswami wrote called A Living Theology of Krishna Bhakti. Tamal Krishna wrote, in addition to noting the many ways women contributed, Prabhupada credited his movement's success to their magnetic presence amidst the men, nearly all of whom, he reasoned, would not have otherwise stayed. So this means that if you're forcing people into a mold that's not suitable for them, that's actually the caste system. That's not Daiva Varnashram. And I compare it here to a topiary. A topiary is a shrub that's clipped to create a certain form according to the clipper's desire. And it's not the plant's natural shape, but it's a forced artificial shape imposed on it. So you can see it's visually entertaining, but if it's applied to people, they're forced to function artificially. It can lead to misery. It prevents someone from serving according to their proclivities, and it's a kind of violence. No one wins. So the opposite of this topiary consciousness is to empower others. And that means to recognize and encourage them and to facilitate their abilities. And this creates a very dynamic environment in which the society becomes stronger and the individual becomes also more confident. Our leaders shall be careful not to kill the spirit of enthusiastic service, which is individual and spontaneous and voluntary. They should try always to generate some atmosphere of fresh challenge to the devotees, so that they will agree enthusiastically to rise and meet it. That is the art of management, to draw out spontaneous, loving spirit of sacrificing some energy for Krishna. And then as the tree can flourish if it's not artificially clipped, similarly the devotees can too. There's a wonderful story I heard from Gopi Puranadana, I think his name is Mula Prakriti's husband, is it? Gopavrinda. Yeah. So in the 70s there was a group, he was among them, and they were traveling around introducing techniques for distributing Srila Prabhupada's books very successfully. And they suggested to Prabhupada that they could do this very widely. They were doing it in a small way. They could tell the devotees what lines to say so that people stop walking, what lines so that people hold the book, what lines so they give a donation, so forth. And they thought this would be wonderful because book distribution would increase dramatically. And Prabhupada heard their proposal very carefully, and he said, each person is his own genius. You simply teach them to be sincere, and Krishna from within their hearts will give them the words to say that people are attracted to his books. So in this way, he's seeing the value of our own consciousness developing and coming closer to Krishna and understanding the power of that. And this is the mood that he wanted to introduce throughout his society. He really expected greatness from all of us, and it's evoked by encouragement. Great people usually have, around them somebody who expects them to be better than they have any intention of being. There was a wonderful study done of teachers and students, and they divided the students into two approximately equal classrooms in terms of their abilities, their attitudes, everything. And they told the teacher going into one classroom, you're going to have a lot of trouble. These students are very difficult. You know, the attitude they have, their disciplinary training is very lacking. Just expect the worst. And they told the other teacher going into the classroom that was very similar, these are extraordinary students. You won't believe how motivated they are, you know, how they'll be so enthusiastic to do their work, etc. And they found that the students developed according to the teacher's expectations. Wow. That is the power of expectations. So if people come to women and say you're less intelligent, you're very materially motivated, you can't make advancement very readily, etc., that manifests just through the impact of that consciousness. The mercy the Lord bestows upon a particular person engaged in executing the responsible work entrusted unto him is beyond imagination. But the Lord's mercy is received due to our penance and perseverance in executing devotional service. So we want to have high expectations of ourselves and all those around us. So this will propel us to achieve heights we otherwise would not achieve. So we have a reader.
I am especially proud how my household disciples are preaching Lord Chaitanya's mission. This is a new thing in the history of the Sankirtan movement. In India, all the acharyas and their descendants later on acted only from the man's side. Their wives were at home because that is a system from old times, that women are not required to go out. But in Bhagavad Gita we find that women are also equally competent, like the men, in the matter of Krishna consciousness movement. Please therefore carry on these missionary activities and prove it by practical example that there is no bar for anyone in the matter of preaching work for Krishna consciousness.
So again, some some males who are especially conservative say that Prabhupada was very lenient when he came to accommodate women, but he actually wanted a more strict society than what he presented. But in fact, we don't find any statements or example to that effect from Prabhupada's writings or his conversations. So they're, in one sense you could say that they're making assumptions that are not validated by Prabhupada's own words. So we move on to the butterfire principle, that the whole material creation is centered on this male-female attraction, which really complicates the male-female dynamic. So it's important to be aware of it, otherwise there can be havoc.
Pumsastriya mituni bhavam etam tayor hridaya grantam ahu. The whole material world is going on because of the attraction between male and female.
Unfortunately, in this present civilization, both men and women are allowed to be attracted to one another from the very beginning of life. And because of this, they are completely unable to come to the platform of self-realization. They do not know that without self-realization, they suffer the greatest loss in the human form of life. The span of youth expires very quickly. One who wastes his life simply by committing sinful activities in youth immediately becomes disappointed and disillusioned when the brief period of youth is over.
So there are many, many warnings in this regard. And we don't want to maximize this attraction between male and female. Rather, we want to minimize it. Otherwise, it can be such a distraction. So women and men are advised to conduct themselves sensibly to avoid this very grave pitfall.
The strong desire for sex will continue as long as we are in material existence, because sex is the center of all material pleasure.
So Prabhupada's desire is that we become serious, just as he was also so serious about Krishna consciousness, and always keep Krishna in the center.
Sometimes our Krishna consciousness movement is criticized for mingling men and women, but Krishna consciousness is meant for everyone. Whether one is a man or woman does not matter. Lord Krishna personally says, Striyo Vaishyas Tata Sudras Te Piyanti Param Gatim. Whether one is a woman, Sudra, or Vaishya, not to speak of being a Brahmana or Kshatriya, everyone is fit to return home back to Godhead, if he strictly follows the instructions of the spiritual master and Shastra. We therefore request all the members of the Krishna consciousness movement, both men and women, not to be attracted by bodily features, but only to be attracted by Krishna. Then everything will be all right. Otherwise, there will be danger.
Rupa Goswami prays, My Lord, I know that young girls have a natural affection for young boys, and that young boys have a natural affection for young girls. I am praying at your lotus feet that my mind may become attracted unto you in the same spontaneous way. This is the Madan Mohan temple in Vrindavan. This is the Madan Mohan is the deity who can help us progress in Krishna consciousness. So the conclusion, our challenges again are very great, as we went over them in the beginning. But despite the complexity of this, we can, I hope, come away with a very simple, memorable takeaway, as it's called. This is Prabhupada's legacy in my mind, that he exemplified this, that he did not stereotype people, it was never hackneyed. He fanned the spark, as they say, and gave everyone an equal opportunity in his movement, according to their qualifications, according to their propensities. And as I mentioned, there's a dire need for this consciousness, not only in our society, but in the world at large. It's attractive, it's natural. It would be an enormous contribution to the world. evoke each person's genius, each person's greatness. Sometimes Prabhupada would insist that Yamuna lead kirtan, that Himavati speaks. He had Kaushalya recite the Ishopanishad. He wanted us to encourage each other more and more.
Everyone should be allowed to render service to the Lord to the best of his ability, and everyone should appreciate the service of others. Such are the activities of Vaikuntha. Since everyone is a servant, everyone is on the same platform and is allowed to serve the Lord according to his ability.
So we're not promoting feminism, we're promoting Krishna consciousness. We all have different strengths. That's Krishna's arrangement. When we work together, we can find this unity and diversity. But if there's no sense of equal opportunity, the devotees will feel alienated, they'll feel distrustful. They'll lose faith in the leadership. Our whole movement will become weakened. So it's such a critical issue that needs to be looked at very closely. We find that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was the combined form of Radha and Krishna. So we have both. Sometimes he was very analytical when he spoke to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Prakasananda. We would find the vast intellect, and other times he would swoon in ecstasy, be overwhelmed by emotion when he was in the mood of Radharani. So both things were there. We don't want to limit, clip either things, but let them both dance fully. We need both, the intellectual and the loving. And then the full strength of Prabhupada's movement will be born. So we have these websites, and we also have this book, very painstakingly compiled by our own Pranada Devi Dasi. It's available on the VaishnavaMinistry.org site. And as you can see, it's quite voluminous, although when the type is smaller, it becomes less voluminous when the font is smaller. But it's quite a thorough study of women in the Hare Krishna movement. So if there's more interest, it's available online.
Thank you so much. So you were talking about, expectations, others' expectations of us, and what we encounter can be either uplifting or discouraging. So I grew up in ISKCON, and when I was, a young person, I would attend the classes every morning, and so we would hear these scriptural statements, and the speakers would be talking about these points that were that did have a psychological and emotional effect on me, and I think on other girls as well, because there wasn't a debriefing or any kind of help for us to understand them in the context of Prabhupada's kindness and how to interpret the statements. So I think that, so it's sort of, I guess it's something I just wanted to comment that I'm not sure what the solution would be, but I'm often concerned about the children who are going through classes, and if they're just kind of dependent on whoever's speaking and however that person chooses to talk about those statements, and how that can really make it or break it for our own, how we feel about ourselves in spiritual community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true. There's no easy solution. I mean, it's really a matter of education and attitude, not just education. You can memorize the verses, but if you don't have the right attitude about the verses, then you can misinterpret them and misrepresent them. So it's very important.
Thank you, Visakha. I was wondering if there's access to this PowerPoint in the name of education, just sharing it and being able to refer to it ourselves.
Yeah, it's on the Vaishnavi Ministry North America, NA.
It is?
Yeah,
Okay.
It's called What's a Woman to Do There? We
Okay.
changed the title for the occasion. But
All right, that's good to know. Also, I was wondering how you see the future in terms of, we hear of so much opposition to some of the things you've presented, especially by leaders in India who even threaten succession, seceding from ISKCON. if there's women gurus, etc. That do you see that as time goes on and the youth, even in India, who are accepting more equality, that it will eventually kind of dissolve, or how do you see the future? Because sometimes it seems very difficult to see how things are going to be peaceful even within ISKCON.
Yeah, it's a good question. For I think almost a year, Brahmatirtha Prabhu, who is our preeminent mediator in ISKCON, sat with both sides, the very conservative devotees in India and the other members of the GBC who were wanting women to be gurus, and they could not come to a conclusion. So when I heard that, I thought, that's very grim, very grim situation. It seems that there'll be a schism unless women just don't become gurus. That was the other, that's what the condition is now.
But do you think that, with time and the fact that India has to change also because the women are taking, different positions, that will be helpful for...
Well, there's a core of devotees who feel that women taking positions is the influence of Westernism, Western mentality, and that's the degradation of the traditional Krishna-conscious society. And so they'll just see that as further degradation and become more entrenched in their own position. That's what they see the West as, that we're all degraded because we have women leaders and taking positions that women should not take.
But do you think that the youth will be different in perceiving all this? And in one sense, as they say, as the dinosaurs die off, that the next generation may have a different view of
certainly
the world.
In the West, that's true.
You don't think so?
I haven't seen it in India. Maybe someone has more insight than I do.
I made a comment in the beginning, I think I'll elaborate on it. Women can talk about this all they want, and we're preaching to the choir, so to speak, and we're saying the same things over and over again. But unless our esteemed fathers, husbands, and sons take the microphone and start educating other men, nothing is going to change. We've tried it, we've seen it, we've been decades now in this conversation. And it really requires our protectors to protect us and educate other men, because men don't listen to us, they don't take us seriously. So it's a matter of men stepping up and speaking strongly, perhaps learning from us, learning from our experience and how we've discussed this, how we've studied Prabhupada's books, how we've assimilated it and understood it. And they can learn from the perspective that we've gained. But we're really dependent on men because they're not going to listen to us.
In the defense of men, I must say that there were several that spoke up very strongly for women to be gurus, for example.
Yeah, it's just such a minority, and they then are categorized as just, liking the women. It needs to be a more global.
Well, the GBC did say that women could initiate. It's just that this very powerful contingent threatened a schism. And so they were very scared of the schism.
But that powerful contingent has been speaking and, really pushing their agenda for at least 2 decades, at least. And they've been very constant on it. They work behind the scenes. They're constantly speaking and going around and talking to the managers and leaders in ISKCON. And, women aren't doing that. We're peacefully engaged in our service and hearing and chanting. We've done the best we could. So it really requires that kind of like a societal change, I think, is going to come from the men taking up a voice.
A couple of things came up with that is I don't see the large group of male devotees ever changing, at least the older ones. And we're very dependent on the youth, the ones that are up and coming, all of them to take over, and as everyone dies off, it will change. right now what they see is that as women take more leadership responsibility in the movement, they, at least my what I perceive out of it is they see that as feminism of the West. That it's feminism has infiltrated with the women. And it's not, according to Prabhupada's instructions to us, but that's how it's perceived. And it feels wonderful as a woman to be able to do what we are inclined to do and to contribute to Prabhupada's movement and, use our strength. And it was like that in the very beginning, back in, 68, 69, like that, when I first came. And, I just wish it had stayed like that over the years.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Visakha Prabhu. You gave some evidence that Srila Prabhupada, in the example of Vaishnavi Diksha, was on board. Is there actual evidence from Srila Prabhupada that he did not want Vaishnavis ever to take Diksha, or is that merely an opinion?
Oh, there's one statement in the 4th canto about Dhruva Maharaj, that he was going to the forest because of the insult from his father. So there's a phrase, just a phrase, it's not even a sentence in a purport, that he couldn't take initiation from his mother because she was a woman. Mm-hmm. And so they expand on that no women can initiate because Dhruva Maharaj couldn't be initiated by his mother because she was a woman. That is in Prabhupada's books, they find in other scriptures, remote, exotic scriptures, that there's some statements here and there. But as far as Prabhupada's corpus, that's the only statement.
Well, one thing in relation to your question that I personally see is that our second generation, the mothers of these children that they're having, are really wonderful. They just do everything to ensure that their children are brought up safely in Krishna consciousness. Of course, it depends on how much they're practicing. If they're practicing a lot, then they can give more. If they're practicing less, they give less. But the idea that children are extremely important to them. So I see that coming through, as the next generation. They're treating their girls and boys, I think, pretty much the same. They give the girls facility.
Is this in the West or India?
Well, I see it here, so I don't know so much about India, but
But your son-in-law is from India.
yeah, my son-in-law's from India, and he's very good. And his father was probably more into, the old style Indian. But he's not like that, nor are his friends. All the men in this community, aren't they? They're wonderful fathers. They delight in their children. That's a huge, huge improvement.
Thank you. Visakha, I have a question, a little bit personal, if you don't mind, and a comment. The question is that you're one of the first one who broke the glass ceiling as becoming the temple president of one of the biggest temple in ISKCON, which has a lot of Hindu originally Indian people. So I just want to ask you, how is it going for you? And the comment I'd like to make that I had the great fortune to be able to work with some of the wonderful Vaishnavis and the Vaishnava ministry. We just finished a documentary about Mother Krishnanandini, who was going to become one of the first Vaishnavi Diksha gurus. It's going to come out January, and mother of 10, living in an inter-religious marriage, one son being gay. How did she deal with that? And she's contemplating on her own demise. She was dying when I interviewed her. So it's going to be very powerful, and besides the wonderful man that we have, I also believe in the power of storytelling. And I'd like to offer my services in this regard to kind of come out more and more inspiring stories. And one of the great stories is yours. Thank you for writing the book and making wonderful films.
Thank you so much. Where will that film be available about Krishnamurti?
I don't know yet. We are just about to finish it in January. If you have ideas, I will be happy to sit down with you.
All the devotees should see it. She was such an extraordinary devotee. Amazing.
And the way she died, it was like really, really, really touching. And I interviewed all of her 10 kids, and they are just like the ripples of her love. Like, I don't know where did she get all the energy, but they all wonderful people touched by the mother's love and protected from depression and from like social alienation by the mother's love. And I think it's very powerful. I'm looking forward to other people to see it.
Thank you for doing that.
Wow. That's real protection, the love. Feel the ripples of love. Those are beautiful words. Thank you. So it's very challenging, I must say. I made up for all the meetings I missed before I became part of the manor. I go to those meetings regularly all the time, sometimes very lengthy meetings, which is quite challenging. But I was really surprised that the so-called former Hindus are very supportive. I was very confused how they would be so supportive, because from that traditional background you wouldn't expect that. And then it seemed to me that most of them spent at least 50 years, some of them were born in the UK, it's been a significant amount of their life. So their whole lives they were under the Queen, Queen Elizabeth. She's on every coin, she's on every stamp, she's on every bill. So I think that really infiltrated their consciousness subconsciously. And so they were quite accepting and supportive. Wow.
So you think you owe it to the Queen?
I do. I feel indebted to the Queen. And she was so fixed in her, her children got so scattered and diverted. But she was very fixed in her duty from a very young age, from her 20s. And she never wavered from that. So.
And she didn't want to do it.
Yeah, she didn't want to do it. She didn't want to do it, but she took it up and she did it excellently, without flaw.
So I really appreciate what you said about men speaking up. It really resonated with me. And it reminded me of a lot of voices that we're hearing. I guess you could say on the right, very conservative voices like Jordan Peterson, of the like, Jordan Peterson. Really, in his estimation, in Prabhupada's generation, I don't think we've seen in the way he was raised, in the family unit, the nuclear family unit, and the love and the protection that that they felt, and of course even more so before the British era and but really a lot of folks are saying, intellectual leaders are saying that we have a crisis in men actually in society. There's actually a really big problem. The men are not being trained properly. The values are not being communicated to the men, and this is actually creating it's a crisis. It really is a crisis.